and we have the value for 2023. So we're on the data set that we have downloaded from our sources, that being World Bank, only has data set for 2023. And we have data for population and carbon dioxide for the same selection of countries as well. And then after that, last week we cleaned all those data sets. And the way we cleaned those data sets is we selected columns that are of our interest. So if you take a look at the data set that we're working with, there are a lot of columns that we're not interested in, like the country code, we don't need it. The series code, we don't need it. So we're only going to select the country code column and this actual data for 2023. So by using a list within a bracket next to a data frame name, we have selected those two columns. And then that'll give us a view of a data frame, and we need to make an actual copy of it. So we used a copy method to copy it. And then we used a rename method in order to rename the column names. And the column names have been renamed to CO2, POP, GDP, etc. And in order to do that, we give each method has parameters, and parameters are the inputs that you need to provide to a method in order to tell that, okay, we need you to do this, and this is the information that we want you to work with. So those are called parameters, and the rename method takes in a columns parameter, and that columns parameter takes in a dictionary of an old column name and the new column name that you want to rename it with. So if we run that, our data set is now going to look like this. So we have a clean country code information and 2023 CO2 value with a clean column name. And the same will be the case for the population data set and the GDP data set. Are you here with me so far? This is what we covered last week. Great. And we also replaced those NA values. So as you can see, many countries, small islands, we don't have data for it. So so the data that the World Bank has provided uses ... to indicate that the country doesn't have any data. And when we read that into our data frame, Pandas thinks that the data frame actually does have data because it's a string, ... and Pandas thinks it's a data. But we need to tell it that this is actually not data, it means missing data. So we're going to replace the whole data frame and there are three parameters here. The first parameter is the string that you want to tell the Pandas that it should be read in as a NA value. And then the second one is the data type NA, and we access it by calling Pandas package itself. And then in place parameter setting to true, it means that you are actually making changes in this data frame. So if you use the same thing, without in place true, then it'll do the same. But since this is not saved to another data frame, it won't give you the the desired results. It'll just perform it and it won't save it. But if you give it in place true, then it'll save the result to the original data set that you are working with. So whenever you encounter this situation, then you want to check if you have your in place parameters set to true. And then we learned, and then we learned how to, sorry, that doesn't look right. And then we learned how to select a column. So the GDP column, we selected by putting this string, the column name, into a bracket. And you can notice that, so here, there's only one bracket that we're using, right? Whereas here, we're using two brackets. And the reason why is here we're selecting multiple columns, and here we're selecting only one column. So this will give us a series. So one-dimensional data frame, one-dimensional, like just string of data. And this one gives us a data frame. So there's a big difference there. And if we call a isNA function, then it'll give us only the selection of data sets that are selection of data that are missing data. And if you add them up, then you get the number of missing values. And the reason why you get number of missing values is because the isNA method gives you true. And in pandas, true is considered as 1 and false is considered as 0. So if you add them up, then you're going to get the number of missing values. And finally, we merged these data sets using pandas using merge method from pandas package. So in this merge function, we gave GDP clean data frame and then CO2 clean data frame, and then we merged it on the country code. And we did the same operation using the first merged data frame, and then we added the population data on top of that. And the result comes out like this. Is this where everyone is? Are we all good on this? Is there any question on that last part? Thumbs up if you are happy with where you are. Getting 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs ups. Need more thumbs ups? Great. Great. Nice. Yeah. Okay, moving on. So now we're going to try and drop rows with any missing values. So, oh, sorry, let me just give you like a brief overview. So now that we have all these information for each country and their GDP, their CO2, and their population, we're going to calculate the carbon budget for each country that takes their GDP and population into consideration. And to kind of like give you an overview, So now we have like these three, now we have these 3 data sets, right? And we need to gather additional information in order to calculate the carbon budget, in order to allocate fair share of each country's to the global carbon budget based on their GDP and CO2 and GDP, CO2, and population. And in order to do that, we're going to load another data set that Sang-Yan has prepared for us based on the global carbon budget project data. And he selected data that gives the 1.5 degree scenario global carbon budget. So this is not allocated to any country. This is global, so that we can start allocating that budget to individual countries. And that would be sort of like the goal of our modeling here. And before we go into that, let's just make sure that the data set that we're working with is free of any missing data. Because when you're doing analysis, you always want to check if your data frame, how many missing values your data frame has. And it's always advisable to eliminate any missing values so that you're not introducing any error. And sometimes you do want to keep those missing values because not having data for certain things is also a data point. So it really depends on the case. But here, we're just going to ignore all the countries like this that has missing value. And in order to do that, we call the data frame called merged df, and then we're gonna run we're gonna call a drop NA method in it. And can everyone run this code on your own Google Colab sheet? Are we all good? Then if you run this, then you'll get a data frame that is now free of missing data. And so if you call this function on the final df now, you should have no missing value. Let's just check that. Then you get the number of missing values as 0. And this is very important when you're doing any type of analysis. So now we have this final data set that we have cleaned, merged, and so on. And we're happy to work with this. This is called tidy data that we've introduced to you in the second week of the course. And this is also long data because we have information for each country and all the variables are spread across different columns. If the columns had the country name and the values were just spread out like this, then it would be called wide data, but this is long data. And then Pandas also comes with a method called toExcel that allows you to save your final data frame as an Excel file. So if you run that, then you will have your you will have your final df here showing up on your Google, on your drive, wherever you decide to save it. So here, a lot of you have trouble with finding the path, and that's always like a big challenge when you start data analysis. So you need to tell the IDE where you're reading the data from and where you're saving your results to. So in this case, this path name comes from this, right? So Google Colabs, this is where I keep all of my data sets. And if you click on this ... then you can copy path. And if you copy path and then paste it here, you can see how this path is called in this Google Drive. And then I'm going to give it the file name that I want to save it to, and then its file extension. So we want to save it to Excel file. So we're going to give it an Excel extension. And then I just use that to tell it where to save it. And here there's an index parameter as well. An index parameter makes sure that the file that you're saving it to, it doesn't have any index. And the index means, so whenever you're working with a Pandas data set, you'll see like this number in front. And it's because when pandas data frame is handling data, it gives unique identifier for each row, so that it keeps track of all these, keeps track of all the rows that are that exist in the data frame, and it ensures that the rows don't get duplicated and so on. So, but then that information is not really relevant to us, right? So we drop it when we save it, so that we don't have index unnecessary information lying around. And we can do the same for other file extensions. So you can save it to CSV, but you do need to change that extension to CSV to match that. And there are a lot of other options. I think, yeah, you can save it to, JSON file. You can save it to LaTeX, Markdown, NumPy. You can pickle it, you can Parquet it, you can SQL it, you can use it, you can save it as a format for Stata, so many things. So, but then we're just gonna work with Excel for now because that's what we're most familiar with. So do you have a data frame saved in your Google Drive?